Hey, what's up, guys? In this video, we're going to go ahead and mix down and master our G House track. We're going to try out some different techniques, something that might work better for this style of music, and we're going to reference our track "Boom" by Tiesto and Seven to see where we're at as far as the loudness range and kind of get it to somewhere close. So, first things first, let's go ahead and listen to what our final arrangement sounds like before we begin to mix it down. All right. So, there's gonna be a couple techniques that we're gonna listen to here. First, we're gonna throw on a loudness meter. Now, I use WLM, the Waves loudness meter, all the time. Um, but there's a couple techniques that I like to use from another plugin, just a spectrum analyzer by Voxengo called Span. Now I throw this on here, and then what I like about this is you can freeze the readout real quick. Okay, so basically, let's listen to our reference track real quick, and then we're gonna listen to the peak of it at the drop, and then we're gonna work on looking at where the readout is and kind of match our readout to that to see if we can get something similar here. So here is the drop of our reference track. Okay, so you can see that you can freeze it right here. And the bass is around -30. Now let's take a listen to our track. And mind you, this is without any mix down yet. This is kind of just a rough mix down. So, okay, so on the drop of our track. Okay, so you can see that we're really low on the low end. We have to boost it up. Although we have to boost up the entire track itself because the overall volume of it is pretty low. So there's a couple of things that we can try here. Let's listen to our drop in WLM to see where our readout is. Okay, so you can see we're at -9, and we can push it probably. Let's see where the reference track is reading out at. Okay, so you can see it's at -7. So we got some room to push it a little bit. Now, there is a couple things we can do to get that extra little bit of volume that we're trying to get here. We can crank the limiter, although that might squash the dynamics a little bit. We already have an imager on here that has the sub bass completely in mono, and then we have the image set up right here. So let's try throwing on a little bit of glue compression. We're going to use the glue compressor in Ableton. Okay, so ideally you want like a decent attack or a decently open large attack to make room for the transients. You want a small release and then a small ratio. So we're at 2 right now. So that means for every 2 decibels that goes over the threshold, 1 decibel is going to come out of it. Okay, so if we press play here, and then we're going to kind of lower the threshold till we get this meter move. Oh, we gotta change our range to about 6, 7, because that's what we're aiming for. Okay, so we have a threshold at about -30, whatever, and we're gonna right now there's gain reduction going on. We have to turn on soft clip. Okay, so we're gonna make up for it with the makeup parameter here. It basically kind of compensates for the gain reduction going on. Okay, let's see where we're at the readout here. Okay, we're still kind of low here. Okay, so we're almost there, not quite. So there's a couple things here we can do. We can try doing a really, really, really small amount of OTT. And this kind of adds a little bit of brightness to it. We're going to throw it on before and we're going to only put about 30%, not a lot. We don't want to do crazy compression or anything on there. Okay, so we're going to kind of stack the thing you got to move here is like these boxes right here. This is basically how you control it. So you want to kind of move these boxes to where these meters are barely hitting them. Okay, so we're kind of hitting it. Now, there's a couple things here too. We haven't really even mixed down. We kind of left the arrangement as is. One thing I can kind of do to see if we can get some loudness or more clarity, I guess you could say, is we're going to minimize all the tracks here, and we're going to and highlight all the buses at once, and then we're going to lower all the buses at once. Now, this is just a technique to kind of give us some headroom here. Okay, therefore, I'm lowering all the elements at the same rate so that they kind of stay at the same volume relative to each other. Now, what that does is it gives us a lot more headroom, and then we can boost these a lot more, which might give us a little more, um, I guess the word the word you can say would be presence, like a lot more oomph to the mix here. All right, so it's all about trial and error, really. Okay, so you can see we're hitting it now, but you're hearing some distortion, obviously, in this. So we need to compensate for that and fix that. Now, that could be obviously from our sub bass. We can lower our sub, or it could be from our kick. So we're still hitting 9 on here. Let's do a couple things here. Let's try resetting everything. We're just going to hit Control Z a bunch here. And go back to where before I lower the group bus on everything here. And even let's go before I even got rid of, okay. So before we even put the glue compressor on. Okay, so this is originally what we had. Now it's still hitting 9. Sometimes if the mix down is already kind of proper, we don't really need to even do much here. Like, I compressed the kick initially pretty good, which is kind of the punch of this track here. Okay, so let's kind of just maybe we can just boost the limiter and see what results we get. Okay, so we're getting 7 now. And let's throw on the span plugin, see how our bass is hitting, if it's getting to -30. Now, this is kind of the easy part about reference tracks is it helps you just gather a a perspective of where your track is sitting at right away. And you can kind of gather where to fix certain areas real quickly versus kind of listen to it without a reference track. It's really tough to, I mean, it's not tough, but you'll listen to it and it'll sound good to you up until you hear it compared to another track of an artist that you like or of a track that you want to sound similar to. And then you're like, "Oh wow, it doesn't sound anything like it." And then it could be kind of frustrating because you had this impression that it was good the whole time. And then it just kind of lets you down that your track isn't holding up to where you want to make it sound like, the pros. So a good way to do this is just kind of, use a reference track the whole time to kind of gauge, and then as you build your track up, you basically, you hear it every step of the way so that you adjust your track every step of the way. And therefore, when you get to the final mix down stage, there's not a lot of work to be done, which is kind of the case here. Our track is pretty well mixed as it is. So therefore, I didn't really put a lot of mastering on this. And we basically put an ozone imager. And the imager basically is what enhances the stereo image of your track. It also has a use to make sure that your track is mono compatible. And what is mono compatible? It means that your low end of your track should be in mono. And if it's not going to sound good in a really large club environment or on a stage because a lot of those sound systems are done in mono. And therefore, if your sub bass isn't in mono, it's gonna spread. Your low end's gonna be spread out. It's not gonna be fully in the center of the mix, and it's not gonna have that driving impact that actually all professional tunes really have. And how do we check if our track is in mono? It's pretty simple. We press play on the bass of our track. Now you see it's spreading out all over the place here. That is basically for the higher end. But when you get to low end, this should be a straight line, just a straight line, just like that. Now, if it wasn't, like for instance, let's say I put it up here, you see it's all over the place. And that means that your sub bass, your low end is spread throughout this stereo spectrum here. And it's not going to sound as good as it can, especially if you have it on a stage, like you're playing a festival or you're in a club with a good system. It's not going to punch and have that low driving impact that makes people really want to dance. And there's another good area is too that the low end should never be hitting -1. Now ours was, all the way up at +1, which is good, fine, but it still is not the best it could be because it is not a straight line, which is what you want your sub or your low end frequencies on your track to be. So to fix that, if you listen to your track and you have imager on it on your master channel, and you see this. Okay, so your track isn't entirely mono compatible. It's not going to sound the greatest on a sub state or on a stage or a club. You just basically just drag it all the way down. And you're basically killing the width of it. You're just making sure that the stereo width of the low end area, the low end band, is really just entirely taken care of. And you have an entire straight line, and that's the way it should be. Now, the rest of these bands are different. They should be spread out. Like that one, and then this one. And then this one is the super high end of it. So basically, to get a decent stereo image on your track from Imager, I always just kind of set them up like this. They should be in a decline or an incline, depending on which way you look at it, position. So you got your high end, highest, your mid, or your, next range band 3 would be a little lower, and then band 2 would be a little lower, and then band 1, which is your low end, is all the way down to make sure that your sub bass is in mono. So that's the stereo imager explained from Ozone 8. And then we have our limiter. Basically, this squashes anything that goes above a certain range, and you don't want to obviously push it too hard, because that means it's gonna sound horrible. You're going to get distortion, lots of clipping. It's basically the same thing, and you're gonna lose dynamics a lot when you try to if you try to crank this up. Like, say your track isn't hitting the decibels that you'd like, and you start to crank this up, and if your volume reduction is just like going way down here, you're gonna lose a lot of dynamics, and you don't want that. Your track's not gonna sound clean. The transients of the snares and the kick and all the drums are gonna sound muddy, and they're not gonna punch. It's just gonna sound like a mess. So that being said, I'm not sure how well this one is, but it sounded good to the ear. Okay, so you see, we have to actually unsolo our low. Okay, here we go. Do everything else in solo. Okay, we do. So basically, when we press play here, so you can see that I'm actually a victim of my own explanation here, that we are getting a lot of attenuation here. And whether it's affecting the transient or not is up to the ear. Let's listen to the reference track here. Now, what we can do to kind of help this out is maybe throw on the glue back on it again, and that might help. Now let's set a low attack here, or sorry, a low release, low attack. I mean, higher attack. Same thing. Yeah, so we're having the same problem here. Now, there's a couple things here. It's our kick that's really kind of pushing it, which is the problem. There's a couple things we can try to fix that. We can try to lower our kick and see if that helps the overall problem here. And then we can raise over our volume once we lower the kick. Okay, so maybe it's also the drums in general, perhaps. Maybe not. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and like kind of, go with my ear on this one. Now, the rule, that I kind of, it's not really a rule, it's just kind of a guide that with, when you're using this limiter here, is that, yeah, generally speaking, you don't want it to be cranked and the attenuation to be all the way down here. If it's down here and most of the time, I guess you're gonna hear some slight, depending on your mix down, some crunchiness in your drums, and you're gonna maybe get a little distortion. In our case, it's not really affecting the overall transients. Like the drums are still popping really decently, and I think it sounds pretty good. Now there is, a loudness war basically these days of who can get their track the loudest, and a lot of times they don't realize that, that it has a side effect of you lose dynamics with that. So there's a battle between preserving dynamics and basically getting a nice readout on loudness. So you don't have to match the exact loudness of the track sometimes. In our case, I think if we push it more, we're gonna lose dynamics. And I think the reference track is a little crunchy as it is. Although that is probably because I have it already, it's already mastered and it's running through extra effects here, which is what the problem is here. So if we were to basically take that off and then take this off, now listen to it, and then now we listen to ours, or we listen to it with these two on. So like I said, yeah, like it does sound pretty similar as far as the loudness, and it is getting attenuated a little bit, but my ear doesn't hear any like quality reduction from the attenuation. So therefore I think that, in this case the limiter was able to push it to a length or to a level to where you didn't suffer transient loss, and the attenuation wasn't a big deal as far as getting to sound, loud enough to where it would match this. So in this track, this is kind of a case of, like I said, like you kind of mix it as you go, and then your final mix down stage isn't that bad of having to adjust everything and, redo all these volume adjustments to get it sounding right, because you kind of mix as you go and you listen to this track every step of the way to know where you're at. So, before you get to your bass, you make sure your drums are popping just like these. And when you get to your bass, you make sure your bass is popping just like this. And when you get to your melodies, you make sure your melodies are popping just like this. So, you know, without the sound redundant, it just, makes the mix down process easier. And then at the very end, you don't really have a long mix down and mastering process. So therefore, we didn't have to do much on this track. There aren't a lot of, you know, crazy dynamics in this track. There's a low end bass and then there's a kick with some percussion. And it gives us a lot of headroom to work with, really, because those are low end sounds, and they will occupy the lower end of the frequency spectrum. So we didn't have to do much to kind of get a pumping, nice, full, thick sound. And let's just double check that our bass is sitting at um, the right area. It should be around -30. Yeah, we're about -30. So again, uh, yeah, this was pretty much an easy track to mix. A lot of how G House kind of is. It's emphasized on the kick. As long as you got your kick really going, then the track is going to sound really full. And if you pick a good kick sample and compress it right, it makes house really easy to produce. Given that you still make a decent melody and stuff like that, But as far as the dynamics of house music, a strong, nice, full kick is essential. Now, we could try to actually boost maybe just as a last minute kind of addition here, see what we can get. And see how our bass is sitting here. Okay, yeah, we're closer to -30, so I think we could leave the bass at -8. All right, so let's take one final listen through, and then I think we'll be good on this one. This will be wrapped up. All right, let's check it out. All right, I think that one is good to go. So, yeah, I'm sorry there wasn't too many mastering techniques that I wanted to kind of show. I mean, not as many as I could have shown, basically. one thing that I did like to emphasize here is the that -30 in the dance music genre, no matter whether it's dubstep or house music, -30 is where you kind of want your bass to be hitting. If you look at a readout like this, um, I've compared a bunch of different tracks, and upon listening to them and checking out the readout here, -30 always seems to be where the bass sits nicely and sounds really good. And if you kind of aim for that area, your bass in your track will sound a lot more cohesive, and it'll sit nice and it'll sound good, especially when you test it in a car and other things beside your studio or your computer. So that is definitely one piece of advice I would take away from this mastering session real quick here. But yeah, and then again, like another thing to do is, like I said, your mastering session will be quick if you mix it down properly as you go. It's just a preference from what I like to do. Just as far as listening to your reference track as you go along here and mix down as you go. And yeah, so again, hope you learned something in this one, and I will see you in the next track. Thanks for watching.